Hey, Maria, welcome to Whatever Next, the new podcast that's launching in 2026. So I could introduce you, Maria, but it would be great if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your business and what you aim to achieve.
Hello, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. Happy to. I firstly love what you're doing in the book that you've written. We've spoken, and it's such a important resource out in industry. So well done, and congratulations on the success of it. And I'm sure it'll continue to grow, and all the other resources coming along with it. By way of introduction, I run here in Australia a company called Aplo. And we're an IT services company, but I guess we distinguish ourselves by focusing on that human-centered story. So predominantly we focus on government and corporate clients. We what we call the engine room of Australia, of society, really, and we help them to deliver tech. And when I say that, it sounds like it's very, in the depths of products and platforms. I think really our work sits at the intersection of op models and service design and delivery capability and functions and leadership, really, and where all of those things collide, because I don't think delivering good tech is one dimensional. So our services span all those things.
Excellent. And how did you get into it, Maria? What's your background that got you passionate about delivering tech in a transformation space?
Oh, great question. So like you, I've been in industry for over 30 years now. I started as a developer. I moved around into different roles and project managed, and then took leadership roles. And I think I got to a point, probably in the last decade, where I'd rolled out so many large technology transformations. Really large budgets, really big, big tech solutions. And while we'd get to the end of these very successful projects from a delivery point of view, we'd all go out for go live dinners, and they'd be, celebrating our on time, on budget, on scope, delivery achievements. The truth is, when I revisited, I went out to sites where these solutions had actually been in, integrated. I'm not sure I felt the same sense of success, because in many cases the technology actually didn't improve the users' lives at all. In some cases, actually became a bigger burden for them. I remember, distinctly remember actually talking to one of the users on the ground, and they said something along the lines of, I'm a part-time frontline worker, and I feel as though I'm almost a full-time IT worker, just, in reference to the tech that all of a sudden was imposed on them, and just the degree with which, they were focused on that instead of their actual job. So I think it was at that point that I went, got to do something different here. And so as a bit of a side project, I took on some studies. HCD started to become a bit trendy, and I sat through some courses and did some projects in the evening. Some study in the evenings, and it just really awakened me to this idea and these practices and methods that, Lisa, they were so completely absent in the last 20 years of my career. I'd seen no reference of these skills and capabilities and practices in my industry, in my domain. And so at that point, I guess I felt really moved to bring that to bear, like to bring that to the industry. And that was the beginning of Aplo, I guess. I was managing some strategic projects for a client at that time as a contractor, and I started bringing in some of those new skill sets that I discovered, and it profoundly changed the outcome of that project, the success metric, which was not measured, which was the usability of the product. And that's when I went, from an experimental point of view, this works. This isn't just relevant in product land. This is relevant everywhere tech is designed and delivered. So that's how I got into it, and it's been a raging success since. I think growing in interest and demand, and it's been really wonderful.
And I think that's that story, I can resonate with it totally. That, if we go back 10, 15 years ago, organizations were putting big tech in. They were putting in their ERP technology. They were driving really strong methods in getting the technology over the line. And the on
Yeah.
time, on budget, on cost was something that everyone was striving for. You said that, obviously once you then started talking to people, you realized that the success hadn't landed in the community in the same way it had landed in the team.
Mm.
And then you personally have been on that journey of discovery and education. What do you think it's going to take for others to realize that that is missing? And do you see today that actually it's not missing and organizations are getting it, or it is still missing and it's a battle to bring in that human side into technology projects?
Yeah. I think positively, the interest is coming from the business or the consumer side, whoever really is the recipient or the beneficiary of the solution. Because I think up until that point, the people delivering the tech were just not being measured for those um, those aspects in terms of delivery. And so I think it's that um, that driver is what is forcing these tech teams to change and to bring new skills in. I think from a tech team point of view, I'm still seeing so many of them trying to solve today's problems with yesterday's skills, right? They're not, I don't see too many organizations when we enter into them having necessarily embedded these, new skills and capabilities into their organization. There's still a few rogue, resources, HCD type resources around the place on a one-off project here and there. And so I think as that demand from the business increases and that pressure starts to increase and those GMs start to demand more, those business group GMs and those consumers and customers start to demand more from the tech teams, I think that's going to force these technology groups to, really start to embed these skills and capabilities into their teams, because at the moment it's all very reactive. And I think the measurements still for me, when you enter a tech team today, they're so classic. They're still focused on, service desk stats fixed on first, these volumetric things on the ops side, and then on delivery, it's still very much driven by delivery performance, and still nothing in terms of, we've kind of got this value or benefits management, this value capture concept as part of our business case processes and, measuring that at the end of it. But it's just, I think in a lot of ways it's, you can manufacture a story around, some perceived benefits, and people get very creative in terms of, these are very fiscal, like driven by tangible financial benefits, not necessarily impact, right? Because remember, the people who are approving these types of investments are very just so focused on the financial aspects of that. What does that mean in terms of cost recovery? What does that mean in terms of cost avoidance? What does that? And so it's still very focused around those dimensions, which is necessary. But I think we're starting to see more of the experience lens being brought in. So it's starting to change. I think positively, it's that the pressures are forcing teams to change.
And I think that's definitely what we've all seen, isn't it? That wrestling with the internal mechanics of business cases,
Mm,
functional metrics, and some of those legacy methods and approaches that worked when we were just bringing in tech. But when you stand outside
yes.
the tech and move into the GM world and that business world, the functional metrics and the operational metrics, that's just a hygiene factor for those GMs. And those GMs are looking for a lot more. I love the word you use there, impact. and a lot of this human-centered and coming at it being more human and more honest, we're really trying to get into the impact that the technology is making, not just the
Hmm.
financial and back office benefits that people are bringing in.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you'd studied, and you bring this sort of usability metric in. How is that introduction of more usability metrics going in the transformations you're working on? Have you got any examples of where that has landed well, and you have then thought, hey, this implementation has been a success, it's going to stick?
Yeah, if we're still talking technology transformation, and it's such a good point you made earlier about, the era of ERP implementation, was very much focused on back office, right? Our back office functions. And of course that was about efficiency, right? And I guess naturally in those business cases, we were spending those dollars to be able to make our workforce more productive to save time. But we've not yet evolved those, business case and those investment planning and budgeting processes in line with the very different world, and user cohorts that we're now serving. It's not just a group of back end. So I think, we asked me about examples and how we now measure. I think this is where it becomes important to bring the intangible things in, as well as just the financial, the hard dollar stuff, right? It's, you know, measuring the experience outcomes, whether it's system usability, whether it's, customer sentiment, whether it's NPS scores, and again, depending on the cohort, the users that you're serving. I think from a technology transformation point of view, and we're talking about, integrating solutions into these environments. I think you can't Gantt chart your way into human experience, right? You can't business case your way into human experience. So I think in those early stages of your initiating, stages, it's getting a baseline of what that experience on the ground really feels like. And then throughout the project, no matter what your delivery method is, regularly checking in as you're, you know, e- making your solution available to these people. What is the measure from a usability and a comfort of use, all those factors against that baseline? And I think it's making those measures really visible to your steering committees and to your the organisation more broadly. And again, just today, actually, I got off a call this morning with a client saying, one of the projects that we're working on right now was talked about as exemplar, and they were showcasing how the approach is really, from an innovative point of view, has really shown just this very different level of participation from and contribution from the user community, the business community, who ordinarily would be kept at arm's reach until some point that, we say, hey, look, the solution's ready for your UAT now, or we're writing up some, user requirements or user stories, or, I think this experience for them in this co-design sense, where they've been really part of, some experimentation, some early build out, some prototyping, be playing with it early, seeing adjustments being made along the way in very, true time based on that feedback. They feel so invested in it. It's such a different experience. And I think just, I guess, from both a hard nut, like a very, both a qualitative and a quantitative point of view, understanding how you're going to really capture how the user feels, as well as what we're seeing in terms of, we've reduced this process by this many steps, and, the volumetric hard numbers. Now, that doesn't always necessarily equate to better user experience.
Totally, totally. And I think the other thing, when I reflect back, if we look at the environments we had to stand technology up in 10, 15 years ago, the ability to experiment, engage, participate, test and learn on the tech itself was challenging.
Mm.
As now we're in 2025, we're not in 1980, and the technology is there to encourage that participation early And also a lot of the audiences we're working with and the communities we're working with, I mean, Maria, they're 25, 26, 27. They've grown up.
Yeah.
They are the digital native. And
Yes.
I hope as we move into 2030 that tech teams are recognizing that the digital natives in the organization can contribute so much more to transformation programs than maybe those that were in the minority in the past. When we go back to being in our 20s and 30s, not many people grew up with tech.
Mm.
So it feels as if we're heading into an exciting period for human-centered
Abs-
transformation.
Absolutely. And even, another conversation that I had this week was with a uh, finance client, banking client, what we would refer to as a mum and dad bank, right? And if we're thinking even bigger than technology transformation, because our work spans technology and broader business transformation, this it's such an interesting conversation with this financial organization is that they had this mindset that, our customer base is of the older type. And so, we don't compare ourselves with this neo bank, sector. And I thought to myself, gosh, you're missing out on such a large amount of revenue because you're not, I mean, all you can focus on is retention. If you really are focusing just on that mum and dad audience, right, they'll stick with you potentially if your banking experience doesn't disrupt them too much. But where are you getting new clients from? Because as you're saying, these younger digital natives want an entirely different experience. So surely that's a road to irrelevance. And then talking to somebody else who's come into that same organization with this transformation lens on, and more broadly going, we've got to completely change out the attitude within our organization to not just go, that's not relevant to us because we've got this older workforce. This is the bit that is transformational, that narrative about who we are, our identity, who we want to serve, our position in market. And that's where the broader transformation work begins. The technology is a means to an end, right? The technology can be made right, but only once you know who you're targeting, like how you're positioning, because everything about it, like the language within it, the whole experience around its use and how it's available through what channels and whatever, all depends on that audience. And so that's the bigger transformation that we need to start thinking about. And then the whole workforce behind that technology has to really rethink and reorganize and reinvent themselves to serve a very different customer base. And so, when we step up outside of just this, technology transformation space and we're talking broader business transformation, that's the stuff that really excites me, because I think you're right. These upcoming digital natives are demanding different experiences from those organizations.
They definitely are. They definitely are. And I mean, I say digital natives, but my mum turns 81 this week. And even she, I would class as a digital native. She's on her own iPhone. She's on her iPad. She's embracing it. And I wonder
Yes.
sometimes whether the functional and technical specialists in tech still believe that tech is for knowledgeable experts, not for day-to-day
Yes.
people. And I think, we've got to change that narrative, as you said, in those technical transformation programs to realize actually the audience out there is very different to the audience you're perceiving.
You're
And how
so
we approach
right.
that audience, get them involved, get them engaged, as you said earlier, make it more participative, get it more high energy, get people contributing, the outcomes would be far better. So,
You're so
Maria,
right. Yeah.
when we look about being more human and being more honest in transformation, whether that's IT or business, what is giving you hope? Are we, 20, 25 years in our career? We've been on that journey of looking back of legacy, looking back of what we've learned. Is there hope that tech transformations and broader business transformations are going to become more human and more honest? Are you seeing the green shoots of something we can hang on to believe human-centered change is here?
I I am. I'm hearing more CEOs openly saying we need to be more human with our transformation. I'm seeing boards finally asking to include experience metrics in the, not just cost and financial metrics. I think businesses are even recruiting C-level folk differently now as well, where we may have employed previously based on tenure and experience, but I think the world needs different leaders now. And I'm seeing different appointments into those seats, and they're not necessarily asking for domain knowledge so much, but they're asking for connection. How can you demonstrate to me your knowledge and understanding of the importance of integrating the functions of business together, through the work that we do? I think that gives me hopes. I think also leaders who are more willing now to finally get a little uncomfortable. And I think for a long time, as a leader, you had to know your stuff, and you had to come across to the workforce of having known your stuff. And maybe there's been no better time with all of the uncertainty and the speed of progress. Maybe there's been no better time to be able to admit, I don't know what we're going to head into. I don't have all the answers, but I'm here with you, to work this out. And we're some of this is going to be a bit experimental, but we've got to give it a crack. So that gives me hope.
No, that's totally clear. And I think that ability to connect, and leaders that connect with the audiences, be that employees or consumers, customers, is so vital. Because if you think about the AI era, I mean, we've been talking for a while, we haven't mentioned AI, but if you think about the AI era, knowledge is at the end of our fingertips. If we know how to ask the AI engines the right questions, we're going to get the knowledge. So the knowledge is there.
Yeah.
It has to be scrutinized. It has to be scrutinized. It has to be understood. But actually, what's going to make the difference is going to be that connection, that relationship with humans. And whereas before knowledge was what got me to the top, because I'd read more books, more experience, had access to more methodologies, more training, I
And
can get access to
only potentially understood,
my domain.
my domain, where now I think people have to demonstrate that they understand business more broadly, right? And how their domain, plays a broader role, plays a role in that
Totally.
bigger picture. Yeah.
Totally, which is that connection and those relationship aspects, not so
Yes.
much the expertise side. So, Maria, look, it's
Mm.
been great talking to you. We've covered your history, a bit of my history, and what you're seeing right now, and you are giving me hope that being more human and more honest is starting to matter. Is there any sort of final comment you'd like to give to those listening to the podcast today in terms of what you hope 2030 will look like? And if we caught up in 2030, what would we be saying?
Final call out. So if I was standing in front of a bunch of leaders at the moment talking transformation, I think what I'd be saying is that now more than ever, you've got to be paying attention to the signals that maybe historically you've been conditioned to ignore. But the ones that middle management will try and smother or mask in fear of an amber or a red, traffic light symbol or something that, might present some sort of disharmony, because that those signals of confusion or fatigue or fear or avoidance or decision making under pressure, they're not inconveniences anymore. They're early warning signs that the transformation might collapse. And so I think if leaders want transformation to stick, they've got to stop performing leadership, if you like, and start feeling it, right? Be braver and clearer and more connected at a human level. Because I think transformation can only truly stick when leaders stop hiding behind a plan and start showing up as people themselves. And I think that's a really important bit, right? That you've got to be in it with the workforce.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be my advice.
Brilliant. But Maria, it's been fab talking to you, hearing your story. Let's catch up soon.
I'd love that, Lisa. It's always a joy talking with you. And yeah, again, congratulations on the success of the book, and I hope it continues to gain ground. It's so important.